Hey, how's it going? Hope everyone's staying safe as always and being well during this crazy pandemic. So, as of today, the teams in the States have completed their regular season. Unfortunately, for a few teams here north of the border, due to COVID and postponement reasons, they still have to finish out their season. And what's going to be strange is that the majority of the games are going to be Calgary, Vancouver, because Vancouver lost all that time due to this pandemic. They lost almost a month, so that's why they still are going to be playing while the NHL playoffs are still going on. So it's crazy to think that while there are playoff games, the two of those teams are still going to be playing as well. Obviously, it's meaningless games, but still kind of strange how we're going to have regular season games still going into playoff games. So it is what it is. And then obviously, I'm sure they want to get this playoffs underway sooner than later. And they are. I do believe Saturday is the first matchup of the postseason. So should be an interesting run. Anyways, so the last video I did a little prediction about what I thought these matchups would be and who I think would win. But now, as of now, this change or the standings have changed a little tiny bit. It's basically just two teams for the most part. The first matchup I'm going to talk about is the highlighted Colorado Avalanche taking on the St. Louis Blues. This is going to be a very intriguing matchup. This is their second time in the postseason meeting. The last time came in 2001 when they met in the Western Conference Final. And if you're an Avalanche fan, you'll obviously remember that series and obviously the next series afterwards as you would capture your second Stanley Cup. So I'm sure they're looking for a repeat. I'm sure if beating the Blues means they can go on to win a cup, I'm sure they would play them every single year. The season series was won by the Avalanche 5-3, and I still stand by my statement by before. Sorry, I don't stand by it because this matchup actually got changed. That if I had to predict a team to come out of this matchup, I would go with the Avalanche. I just feel like they have a core group, and it's basically cup or bust this year. They've come close the last two seasons, and they just want to get a taste of what it's like to be in the finals, as obviously they lost last year in the second round to Dallas. And if you're on the other side for the Blues side, you would love to have nothing more than a repeat from 2 years ago when you first raised the Stanley Cup. So I'm sure there's motivation for both teams to make it as far as they can. But if I had to make a bold prediction, my gut would go with the Colorado Avalanche. The second matchup, I will bring the cursor down. And again, if this is kind of blurry, I do apologize, but I have a hard time getting the contrast correct to see the best potential view of for your guys' convenience. But so the second matchup has the now Vegas Golden Knights, who finished second in the division, taking on the Minnesota Wild. Now, for the Minnesota Wild, this has been a wild season. I don't think a lot of people predicted them to be at the position that they were in because they struggled so recently within the last 2 or 3 years. But they have had, it's basically they've been the underdog story, in my opinion, for this season. And that rookie is just unbelievable. I mean, he can make some noise and he can put up points too. So I will give full props to them. But due to recent history and obviously experience in the postseason, I will go with the Vegas Golden Knights. I do believe they are the better team. Despite the fact that Minnesota won the season series 5-3, I do truly believe that the Vegas Golden Knights will want to pursue, just like the Colorado Avalanche. I believe their goal is basically cup or bust. If you're a Wild fan, you're just thinking, can we go on that wild ride like we did in 2003? And obviously they unfortunately fell short to the then Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. The matchup down this way is the North Division with the Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the Montreal Canadiens. Now, I did as much research as I could on the internet, so if I screwed up any of these facts or if I read a misprint or the wrong website, because there is fake news out there, I do apologize. But I did my best to do a little bit of research when it came to these Stanley Cup matchups. So this is the first time since 1979 since these two teams have clashed. It's been unbelievable. That's been that long. But then again, the conferences have changed. And even though they've been in the same division for what feels like an eternity, they just have not been able to meet in the postseason. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup for two original six teams to be duking it out in a best of 7. So this is where I was talking about the math. I do believe this is going to be their 16th matchup in the postseason. Montreal has the edge 8-7. I'm sure the Leafs would love to tie that and then make a run at the Cup. And for the Habs, you got to think it almost feels just like last year. We kind of squeaked into the postseason, even though we locked down that number 4 spot, what felt like a month. I just believe we just barely squeaked in because a 5-game losing streak, and that gets us in the playoffs. Only we could do that. I mean, I got to laugh at that. But I do believe my pick from the last video was the Leafs, and my picks haven't changed. Even though I'm a diehard Habs fan, they're my ride or die. I just don't know if we have enough momentum going into the postseason with a inconsistent Carey Price and injuries and players missing time. It's just hard to get that group of players back together in that group if they haven't been together or played for such a long time together. So if I had to guess between these two teams, I would say the Toronto Maple Leafs will advance to the second round for the first time since 2004. And then the other division in the other matchup in the Canadian division, it has the Edmonton Oilers taking on the Winnipeg Jets. These two teams have met 6 other times in the postseason. Edmonton has swept them at all other six games. So I'm sure if you're a Jets fan and you're in the Jets room, you're like, hey guys, let's see if we can maybe turn the tide a little bit and prove to the NHL that we can take on the best player ultimately in the NHL, hands down, in McDavid. And if you're on the Oilers side, you got to think this can't be a one and done. We can't just be in the playoffs and out. Like, this has to be a serious contending team. And when you have goalie and Mike Smith, who's proven that he can be great, but he hasn't had a lot of postseason experience, we'll see how that can play a factor. And then they also have Koskinen, who has very little postseason experience other than their little stint last year when they had a play-in round against Chicago. But I do believe the Oilers will come out on top. I just think they have the depth. They just have, I want to say, a little tiny bit of experience because there's still a handful of players that were on the 2017 team that advanced to the second round of the postseason. Now, I could say the same thing about Winnipeg. They still have a fair amount of players, or a few players on that team from the 2018 when they made it to the conference finals. But again, if I had to pick between the Oilers and the Jets, I do believe the Oilers will prevail in a best of 7 series. Flipping over to the other side, we now have the Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes taking on the Nashville Predators. Now, obviously, typically this is a one team is Eastern, one team is Western. The only way these two teams would ever clash in a regular NHL season is if it was the Stanley Cup final, because Nashville's obviously on the west side, Carolina's on the east. But due to realignment and this whole pandemic and teams had to go from one division to the next, this is your first round matchup. So obviously these teams have never met in the postseason before. The season series went to Carolina 6-2 in an 8-game series. So if I had to guess, I do believe Carolina is not just a Cinderella team like they were in 2019 when they made it all the way to the conference finals. That was a crazy year for them. And then obviously they made it last year. I do believe they took out the Rangers in the play-in round before ultimately falling short to the Boston Bruins in the first round of the playoffs. So I'm sure that now that they have that little bit of experience, that little bit of playoff experience, I'm sure they basically have, for the most part, the same group of players from 2 years ago when they made that incredible run, unpredictable run as well. So if I had to make a prediction between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Nashville Predators, that's going to be with the Hurricanes. Even though Nashville does have players that were on their 2017, some players from the 2017 run when they went to the Stanley Cup final against the Pittsburgh Penguins, I just don't know. There's just something about this Carolina team that's just unbelievable. So as I said a few times already, Carolina will be advancing to the second round. The next matchup has, oh my gosh, what is that? Oh, sorry, the Florida Panthers taking on their state rival in Tampa Bay. And first time these two teams have ever met in the postseason. And I'm going to give the Panthers the benefit of the doubt. This season, They actually pretty much owned Tampa Bay. No, they, I don't want to say owned, but they won their season series 5 games to 3. So they have obviously more wins against their state rivals. With that being said, apparently Stamkos and Kucherov may be ready or are ready to come back for the postseason. So now, even though I did predict for sure that Tampa Bay was going to advance to the second round, my only concern is, even though they have most of the team they had to make their Stanley Cup run last year, you didn't have Kucherov all season this long. So maybe, yes, he can make an impact, and if he can find his feet and be the Kucherov from last year and the one from 2019 when he had like 124 points, if he can get that if they can get that Kucherov back, I do believe they are a serious contender and they will take this best of 7 series. But if him and Stamkos have a hard time getting their groove together, they just cannot click with their line mates, I think Florida may take this. So I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I can't really make a really bold prediction and say Tampa's going to end up taking this in 5 or 6 games. They very well could, but then Florida could easily defeat the Lightning if, like I said, they're not ready to go. So this is the one matchup I will say I can't really make a prediction because it can go one way or the other. The next matchup has the Pittsburgh Penguins taking on their, seems like it's a long-time rival, the New York Islanders. And I didn't know this until I did some research, that this is, where do I put it? This is their 6th time meeting in the postseason. And you'd think that with the cups that the Penguins had in more recent time, that they would have had the edge over their rival. But unfortunately, it's been the other way around. I think this series, the playoff series, has been 4-1. 4-1 for the Islanders. And the only time the Penguins actually beat the Islanders was in 2013. And then they unfortunately lost in the conference final to Boston. But however, this year, as I've said before, I feel like Pittsburgh's kind of on like a revenge tour. I do believe that they have the mindset that, okay, we still have a good group of players together, and having Crosby and Malkin on your team, Letang, you really can't go wrong with those 3 veteran guys in your group. And they like I said, they won the season series against the Islanders 6-2, so they've proven that they can beat them, and I do believe that they will beat them. And no disrespect or anything to the Islanders fans out there, if anyone is an Islanders fan and happens to watch this, but I just think that this Pittsburgh team, because they got bounced out by my Habs in last year's play-in round, I think that they have a lot to prove, and they want to prove a lot of people wrong, because a lot of people are saying they have a lot of rust, they're older, they're not in their prime per se, but I just think that this is just a different Pittsburgh team, and they have a different mindset that, like I said, we want to prove we can make it out of the first round, because the last time they made it out of the first round was in 2018, but unfortunately they fell short to the Washington Capitals, I do believe, in 6 games, and if you're a Caps fan, you remember that run. But yeah, I'm still sticking with my pick. I do believe Pittsburgh will be the better of the 2 teams. And the last matchup that I will be talking about, and this is probably the most intriguing one of them all, has the Washington Capitals taking on their Boston Bruins. This is their 4th time meeting in the postseason. Washington has a 2-1 edge. The last time they met was in the 2012 quarterfinals, where I do believe Washington beat them in 7 games, if I'm not mistaken. And Joel Ward, of all people, was the overtime hero for the Capitals. They split the season series. This is the only series that both teams won 4 games each. Everything else is, like I said, it's been 5-3 or 6-2, whatever the case may be. Or the Montreal and Toronto case, it was 7-3. But I think the most intriguing part about this matchup is Chara, who played from Boston, basically from the 06-07 season all the way to the 2019/2020 season. That was almost 13, 14 years. Will be playing against his former team in the Boston Bruins. So I'm sure he's going to have some emotion playing against those former teams, former friends, no doubt. I know in my last video, I was pretty damn certain that Washington was going to take this series. but there's just something about those pesky Bruins that just, it's like you can knock them down, but they keep getting back up. And like I said, as long as they have that trifecta line with Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak, they're unstoppable. Like I said, if they're not the best line, if they're not one of the best lines, they are the best line in the NHL. And coming from a Habs fan, obviously it's gonna be a little shocking because growing up as a Habs fan, you're told don't like anything about this team, and if you're a Bruins fan, you don't like anything about that team. So it's all about rivalries. But I mean, I have to give the benefit of the doubt to them. I will give the Bruins the edge in this one. This is the one pick I think I will be changing for sure because they just have, like I said, a good group of players. And even though Chara's not there, he's not the leader. Bergeron, who I always thought would be their captain, is their captain finally. It's just too bad he's in his mid-30s. I'm sure he would have loved that C many years ago. But when you have Big Z as a free agent, you hop all over that. And he's clearly been a leader since day one. So those are my picks for this year. And these are the matchups for sure. And I did go on the NHL.com website. And I do believe this is how the playoff format is going to look. So I believe the winner of this series will be taking on the winner of the teams from the North in the conference final, that is. And then obviously the winners of this series, of this group, will be taking on, the winner of this series will be taking on the winner of that one. So I believe it's going to be an interesting playoffs, to say the least. So thank you all again for being a part of watching my videos. If you like what you see, please drop a like again and comment. Feel free to comment, and I will gladly comment back. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so, as I do intend to make at least hopefully one video a day to keep you guys entertained. But as always, take care. Oh, I guess I should highlight Boston since I picked them. Anyways, guys, take care.